Our scripture this morning comes from James chapter 4. It says this: "Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit. Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Amen. You may have a seat.
If you could know when and how you were going to die, would you want to have that information? Rainy, time change Sunday. Let's talk death. You would want to know? If you could know when you were going to die? Do you think it would change how you lived? Tim McGraw thinks so. He actually wishes that each of us had the chance to live like we were dying. We might go Rocky Mountain climbing. James brings up this idea in our passage for today. He doesn't bring up the Rockies, but James does seem to think it important, not necessarily that we know when we're going to die. He absolutely thinks it's important we know that we're going to die, and that living in light of it is actually critical. So our passage today is actually a confrontation of people who seem to have forgotten that reality. So we're in James chapter 4, and today we'll cover the end of chapter 4 and then the beginning of chapter 5. So let's read James chapter 4. We're going to start in verse 13. James says, "Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we'll go into such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit. Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you're a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and then do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. So whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is sin." So I don't know if you're a highlight in your Bible type of person. If you are, maybe highlight verse 17. I want to come back to that at the end. I'm sure you've noticed if you've been with us, but James's writing style is full of concrete images. He loves to use physical objects and imagery to make his points. And here we have another one. He gives the image of mist. It's the Greek word atmos, where we get our word atmosphere from. It's a vapor, a mist, a puff of smoke that's there, but then dissipates and is gone. James uses that image as perspective on our lives. The entirety of our lives on the earth, James says, are a bit like a puff of smoke, a mist, a vapor. We're here, and then we're gone. We appear for a little time, he says, and then we vanish. I think as we age, all of this becomes increasingly evident. You know, when I was younger, a year felt like forever. A calendar year was just like the longest imaginable length of time. And it just speeds up. The other day, one of my kids was like, "Daddy, can you believe in 2 weeks it's my birthday?" And I was like, "Again? Already? Didn't we just do that?" I said, how often are you doing those? And he didn't get that I was joking. And he just looked at me like, he stared blankly at me like, oh no, my dad has lost his mind. He doesn't understand how birthdays work. Life just has a way of speeding up as you get older. So I'm realizing that James is not wrong We are here for a little time, and then we vanish. Psalms has a few passages that speak on this subject. Psalm 39. O Lord, make me know my end, and what is the measure of my days. Let me know how fleeting I am. Behold, you have made my days a few handbreadths, and my lifetime is as nothing before you. Surely all mankind stands as a mere breath, a mist, a vapor. James says, so don't assume tomorrow is coming, because for every single one of us, there will be a day where tomorrow does not come. Psalm 90, you return man to dust. For 1,000 years in your sight are but as yesterday. And when it is past, but are but as yesterday when it is past, or as a watch in the night. So teach us to number our days, that we may get a heart of wisdom. So the psalmist connects numbering our days to being able to live with wisdom. And I love that it's phrased as a prayer or a request. He's saying, God, teach us to number our days. In Psalm 39, he says, let me know how fleeting I am, because that's the issue. There's something about the shortness and smallness of our lives that is so hard to internalize. Like I know my life will end one day. Everyone does. No one thinks they're going to live forever. We all know we are going to die. The problem is operating with that reality in mind and letting it shape how I think and feel and live. So the psalmist says, God, teach us to number our days. Help us actually operate with that reality in mind. And it's a powerful thought, but man, it's hard to hold it in mind. Like in the moment as life is hitting me and I'm dealing with problems and issues left and right, that sort of eternal perspective is so hard to keep in mind. So my wife is doing a midweek Bible study, and it's with some folks from a bunch of different churches, and they do it during school hours, and there's no childcare. So it tends to skew towards an older demographic, just because you can't be there if you have little kids and you don't have childcare set up. So our youngest is in first grade. So my wife ends up being one of the youngest women who were there at this Bible study. And one week they did their study, and the passage was about dealing with life's troubles and problems and complications, but staying present and faithful with where God has you in life. And then they went into their small group just to talk about it and discuss how it applied. And so Courtney, speaks up because they're going around the circle, and she says, yeah, I'm in the middle of all the crazy, being a mom stuff. Got, a business that I'm building and running, and I got kids who are little. And so it's just like the needs are everywhere. We got endless soccer practices, and we got hormones that are out of control, and I'm refereeing fights, and a husband who is occasionally bothersome, and I'm just in the middle of it, and I don't want to wish it away. I want to be present, and I want to be faithful, but that's hard. It's hard to, with just this stage of life. And everybody's like, yeah. And it, goes around the circle, and it comes to a woman who's a widow, and she's older, and her kids have long since left her house. And she says, the way that I need to apply what we studied today is, if I'm not careful, I will resent the place in life that God has me now, and I'll think how I'd give anything to go back to the time when my husband was alive and my kids were with me. And I'll struggle to be faithful today because my mind will just go back to how I'd give anything to have another moment there. When that's not where God has me, he has me here, and I need to be faithful here. And of course, Courtney hears that, and she goes, oh my gosh, I just spent my whole time complaining that I'm exactly where this woman says she'd give anything to have another moment of. Another moment where her husband is alive so that he can bother her. and her kids are still with her so that they can need her. What am I doing? So she comes home, and I'm about to leave to go get the boys from elementary school, and she tells me all that. And it just, total gut punch. I'm just like, oh gosh, oh man, I'm just missing it some days. I'm missing it. So I get in the car and I'm driving and I'm like psyching myself up. You know what I mean? I'm praying and like, come on, God, let's do it. Let's go. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna lock in. And I'm into it. And I'm emotional. And I pull into the car line and I'm like talking really loud to me. I'm the only one in the car. And it's like, come on, God, I'm locking, I'm gonna do it. They're gonna feel them, I'm gonna love them. I'm gonna love these kids. Let's go. And I got tears coming down my face. And sure enough, a Midtown member pulls up right beside me, rolls down the window and is like, hey. And I'm like, I'm good. I'm just fine. This is totally normal. I pull up and, I'm like, let's go. They're not even gonna believe how much I love them. And the boys get in the car having a scream fight with each other. I can't even get a word out. And they're just angrily shrieking at each other with venom in their voices. I didn't last 15 seconds before I was like, oh my gosh, be quiet. Never mind. I'd rather be a widow. Never mind. So this past Wednesday was Ash Wednesday, which is a marker on the historical Christian calendar where God's people intentionally remember the reality that we are dust. We're a mist. From dust we came, and to dust we will return. It's a built-in annual time where we as God's people are told, you need to remember you're going to die one day, and it's better for you to remember that. You'll order your life in a more proper way if you hold that reality in mind, that God numbers our days, we're here, and we're gone. But this is the day that the Lord has made, this one. So embrace it, remembering you're a mist who's here and then gone. So James is speaking here, of course, to us, but primary audience, original audience, to some people who seem to have forgotten that reality. They're not living in that reality, as we're all inclined to do. And he's calling them back. And he's going to take that big concept and he's going to correct one particular thing, one way in which we ought to be applying the reality that we're a mist. He's going to apply it in a very particular, precise way. So now let's read. We're in chapter 5. Remember, the chapter divisions were added later. James didn't break his line of reasoning here just because it went from chapter 4 to chapter 5. So he says, come now, you rich, weep and howl for the miseries that are coming upon you. Your riches have rotted. Your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver have corroded, and their corrosion will be evidence against you and will eat your flesh like fire. So then, and loosely speaking, but back then, there were three main sources or categories of wealth. There were grain, garments, and gold. So in verse 2, James says, your riches have rotted like grain, which can go bad. Grain can rot. And he says, moths have eaten your clothes, because garments can be eaten by moths. They can get torn apart, destroyed. And then verse 3, he says, your gold and your silver are corroded. This is a different way of putting the saying, you'll never see a U-Haul behind a hearse. So James is saying, you've completely forgotten your mist-like nature. You've forgotten your vapor-like existence. You've lost your eternal perspective. You forgot you're here today and gone tomorrow. You forgot that from dust you've come and to dust you will return. Keep reading. You've laid up treasure in the last days. Behold, the wages of the laborers who mowed your fields, which you kept back by fraud, are crying out against you. And the cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord of hosts. You've lived on the earth in luxury and in self-indulgence. You've fattened your hearts in the day of slaughter. You've condemned and murdered the righteous person. He does not resist you. So this is the second time in this letter where James directly addressed people that he refers to as rich. I don't know if you remember this, but back in chapter 2, he mentioned people who were rich. And he says in verses 6 and 7, are not the rich the ones who oppress you, the ones who drag you into court? Are they not the ones who blaspheme the honorable name by which you're called? So he's awkwardly direct with this because at least in chapter 5, it seems like he's confronting people who are in the room. That he's calling out some who are wealthy, and their sin is not the fact that they're wealthy or rich. Their sin is what they're doing with their wealth and their riches. And he lists off some of the particulars. He says that they're oppressing others, meaning pushing down and taking advantage of, and then getting away with it. He says they're dragging Christians to court. He says they're blaspheming the name of God. He says they're withholding wages from people who worked for them just because they can. All the while, he says they're living in luxury and self-indulgence, and that they think they're hoarding wealth, but in reality, they're hoarding their own judgment. So there's a way to approach money as a means of trying to make heaven on earth for you at the expense of people around you. There's a way to use money to insulate yourself from the reality that life is a mist, to try to ignore that fact that all of life is really short, that someday you're going to have a whole different perspective on what mattered and what brought real joy. And if you lived in light of the fact that you're going to die, it would change a lot of things, but it would change how you looked at money. It would change how you looked at and treated people. And I'm caught by the phrasing in verse 3 where James says, your gold and silver have corroded, and their corrosion will be evidence against you. So chemically, that's not exactly how corrosion works, but James isn't describing a science experiment. He's painting a little bit of a picture. And here's the idea. James is saying you have so much of something that you aren't using it. And while it sits there, it's going bad. All the while, others don't have enough. So imagine someone who's starving, and they come into my house, and they see the extra bread in the pantry that's been sitting there a little too long, and now it has some mold on it. This person would say, hey, hang on. You have so much of this that it just sits there and goes bad because you don't use it, all while other people are dying for the lack of it? Why would you keep so much of it beyond what you need so that it spoils while others are dying for its lack? So when James says their corrosion will be evidence against you, it's like he's saying the mold on the bread is the evidence that you took too much for yourself. You didn't need it. You didn't use it, and it spoiled as a result. Okay, having moldy bread is not a sin. I know that you know that, and I know that you know that I know that. So I'm not saying that. What I am saying, I bet almost every single one of us are in possession of things that are going bad due to lack of use. They're just kind of spoiling away somewhere. Like how many of us have shoes we haven't worn in years, and if we ever did put them on, they're just as likely to disintegrate around our feet. I would bet you own some things and you have so much of it that some amount of it is actually just kind of going away, rotting in a corner, spoiling for lack of use. And I point it out because at least for me, when I read the Bible and I come to a place where it's addressing rich people or wealthy people, I almost instinctively think, okay, well, that's not for me. And I want you to make sure when James addresses the rich, pretty much all of us in the room need to think, okay, yeah, I better pay attention to this part. That one's for me. So having money, having wealth, gives you a tremendous advantage. A tremendous advantage. It gives you access and opportunity and power. If you have money, there are things you can do that you cannot do if you don't have money. It gives you potential. It's like having money and resources is like the player who's going pro and he's headed into the draft and he can run very fast and he can jump very high and he can throw very far. Doesn't necessarily make you a better player, but it does mean your ceiling is higher. It means should you reach your highest potential, you can achieve a greatness that the rest of us could not because you have more opportunity. So if you have money, your potential, in a sense, is greater. But with money, it's not just a greater potential for good, it's also a greater potential for evil because you could take advantage of people. You have leverage that you could exploit. If you have enough money in certain situations, there's no external restriction to hold you in check. You can do whatever you want and get away with it. You can exploit people and there's no one to stop you. You can take advantage of people and nothing anybody can do about it. So James offers a reality check here. He says, even if you are so wealthy and powerful and in charge that you can do whatever you want and nobody can stop you, one day you will stand before God and you will give an account for how you've conducted yourself. You'll be held accountable, including what you've done with all those opportunities that money brought to you. Did you use it to help people? Did you use it to bless people? Did you use it to make memories with people? Did you use it to advance God's concerns on the earth? Did you use it to start and support ministries that do God's work? Did you use it to build up God's people and spread God's word? Or did you use it to take advantage of people? Did you use it to withhold from people? Did you hoard for yourself more than you could ever possibly need or use? Did you place its pursuit ahead of relationships that matter? Did you sacrifice your integrity to accrue it? Did you ever ask the question, why did God give me what I have? Because whatever you have, you got to ask, why did God give it to you? Why did he arrange things so that you would have whatever you have? Why did God give you more than one pair of shoes? Why did God give you more than one jacket? Why did God give you so much access to food that it's possible that some could spoil before you ever get around to eating it? I heard the other day the most brilliantly simple illustration. Parents, let's say you find out at your kid's school there's a child there who never eats lunch because his family's poor. So the next day, you pack your kid 2 sandwiches instead of 1. But you forget to mention it to your kid. Everything got distracting and busy. And so your kid, she leaves for school that day, and you don't say why you packed 2 sandwiches instead of 1. Okay, what do you hope your kid does at lunch when she realizes today she has 2 sandwiches instead of 1? You would hope she would think to herself, okay, I need 1 sandwich. So I'll take 1 for me because I need 1. But I have 2. And this boy beside me also needs 1, but he has 0. I should give 1 to him so that I have 1 because I need 1. And then I can give 1 to him, and then he will have 1 because he needs 1. That's probably why my parents gave me more than I needed. So why has God given you more than you need? And this is a serious central part of the origin story of our faith. Like this is where we come from. It was one of the most shocking hallmarks of the early church. There's a historian named Eberhard Arnold. He wrote a book about the early Christians. Here's something that he said. He said, most astounding to the outside observer was the extent to which poverty was overcome in the vicinity of these church communities through voluntary works of love. Christians spent more money in the streets than the followers of other religions spent in their temples. Then Julian was one of the emperors of Rome, and he hated the Christian movement. He was one of the primary persecutors. And at one point, in a angry disgust sort of tone, he says, it's a scandal that there's not a single Christian who's a beggar. These godless Galileans, that was his pejorative for Christians, these godless Galileans care not only for their own poor, but for ours as well, while those who belong to us look in vain for the help that we should be rendering to them. So there's a singer named Andy Grammer. My son put me onto him because he sang the theme song for the Captain Underpants movie, which is a true classic film. Shockingly didn't win any awards. I found it quite deserving. Andy Grammer has a song titled 85. Here's what it says. There's a lie that I believed, The more that I got, the more I'd be free. So I've been away making the green. The more that I get, the more that I need. So pray for my soul. I got a disease and it's cold. There was a dream I was sold. Just get all you can before you get old. So I bought it all and took out a loan. But now that I'm here, I've got nothing to show. I don't want to be 85 saying, oh no, I think I missed it. I was chasing money. I don't want to be 85 saying, I got a big house, but my heart is ugly. As far as I know, Andy Grammer's not a Christian, but he's not wrong in this song as he talks about a point in time where all of a sudden you have an awareness that you previously did not have. You see what you previously did not see, and you go, oh no, I missed it. What was I doing? What was I thinking? The only thing James says differently is that moment may or may not come at a certain point in old age, but for each of us, it will come when we stand before God at the end of our lives. And no one gets to dodge that moment. And in that moment, everyone will realize, oh, it was a miss. What was I doing? How did I not see that? How did I not live my life that way? I knew it was going to end. What was I thinking? So this past fall, my wife's cousin got married in Dallas, Texas, and her grandmother is there, and she's 97 years old. She's the last remaining grandparent for either of us. And for a while, we'd really been wanting to get out there. It'd been a few years since we'd seen her, and we know time is running out. So we've been looking forward to this trip, and I mean, to be honest with you, praying that grandmother would stay healthy and still be with us when we got there. And we also, went in with an awareness that more likely than not, it's probably the last time our family is going to get to see her before she dies. She's, at 97, she's pretty healthy, but you just never know at that age. And so it's after the wedding, and we're gathered in her place. And at one point, Courtney's aunt suggests that the kids do a talent show. And I'm uncertain as to how the Gibson kids are going to handle this opportunity. And immediately, my niece and nephews pop up. They go to a classical Christian school in North Carolina. And so they pop up and run to the front of the room. They clasp their hands and they say, we'll be reciting from memory the Lord's Prayer. And in unison, they say, Our Father, who art in heaven, and they proceed to nail it. And everybody's like, And before we can blink, my 6-year-old runs to the front of the room. And he says, I'll be singing Lose Yourself by Eminem. Palms are sweaty, knees weak, arms are heavy. There's vomit on his sweater already. Mom's spaghetti. And the aunts and uncles all turn and look at me. And I just shrug and I'm like, public school. So we get through the talent show. It's time for everybody to leave. We got to catch our flights. And I tried to practice it so I wouldn't do this. And grandmother looks around the room, and it's it's our whole family. It's her children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. And she knows most of us are probably not going to see her again this side of eternity. Sorry. And she basically speaks a blessing over all of us. And she says, it wouldn't be possible to add up all the time that I've spent praying for you all. It makes me so happy to look around the room and just to have one last chance for us to all be together. She says, I want you to know When you get to be my age, you are going to realize the only things that actually mattered were God and people, because those are the only things that last forever. You're going to have a ton of things that feel really important. And at some point, you will realize they probably were not as important as you made them out to be. That everything that's going to actually matter to you is God and people, especially your family. You're going to realize that's what mattered, and you're going to be so thankful for every second you invested in those things. It all goes by so quickly. So make sure you focus on God and people, because those are forever. And she's not even my grandmother. And all I could do was sniffle out, a week, like, excuse me, I will. So I said I wanted to come back to verse 17, and I want to do it because I like it as the application. Chapter 4, verse 17. James says, so whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him, it's sin. Your days are numbered. So if you know good that you ought to do it. Don't wait. Live with urgency and immediacy. Don't wait to say you're sorry and reconcile that relationship. Don't pass over that time your kid asks you to read to them before bed. Those days are numbered. Don't pass over the chance to kiss your spouse, bothersome though they may be. And don't wait to be generous. Why are you handling your money like that? Don't you know you're going to die one day? And the only thing that lasts forever is God and people. Invest in those things. If something is good and it's in front of you, don't wait to do it. Don't fail to do it. Live like the mist that you are. Let's pray.